Animal Farm. Wow. Crazy book. I will skip the preface, introduction, and go straight to part one. Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm had locked the hen houses for the night, but was too drunk to remember to shut the pop holes. With the ring of light from his lantern dancing from side to side, he lurched across the yard, kicked off his boots at the back door, drew himself a last glass of beer from the barrel in the scullery, and made his way up to bed, where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. As soon as the light in the bedroom went out, there was a stirring and a fluttering all through the animal buildings. Stirring and fluttering. It's like all the animals moving around, making noises. Word had gone round during the day that Old Major, the prize middle wide bore pig, right, had a strange dream on the previous night and wished to communicate it to the other animals. It had been agreed that they should all meet in the big barn as soon as Mr. Jones was safely out of the way. Old Major, so he was always called, though the name under which he had been exhibited was Willingdon Beauty, was so highly regarded on the farm that everyone was quite ready to lose 1 hour's or an hour's sleep in order to hear what he had to say. At the end of the big barn, at one end of the big barn, on a sort of a raised platform, Major was already ensconced on his bed of straw, under a lantern which hung from a beam. He was 12 years old and had lately grown rather stout, but he was still a majestic-looking pig, with a wise and benevolent appearance, in spite of the fact that his tushes had never been cut. Before long, other animals began to arrive and make themselves comfortable after their different fashions. First came the 3 dogs, Bluebell, Jessie, and Pincher, and then the pigs, who settled down in the straw immediately in front of the platform. The hens perched themselves on the windowsills. The pigeons fluttered up to the rafters. The sheep and cows lay down behind the pigs and began to chew the cud. The 2 cart horses, Boxer and Clover, came in together, walking very slowly, setting down their vast hairy hoofs with great care, lest there should be some small animal concealed in the straw. Clover was a stout, motherly mare approaching middle life, who had never quite got her figure back after her 4th foal. Foal. What's the meaning of foal? Foal. What is the meaning of foal?
As a noun, foal means a young horse or related animal.
So foal, a young horse. After her 4th foal, Boxer was an enormous beast, nearly 18 hands high, and as strong as any 2 ordinary horses put together. A white stripe down his nose gave him a somewhat stupid appearance, and in fact, he was not of first intelligence, but he was universally respected for his steadiness of character and tremendous powers of work. After the horses came Muriel, the white goat, and Benjamin, the donkey. So after the horses came Muriel, like the donkeys came. Benjamin was the oldest animal on the farm and the worst tempered. Benjamin would get angry fast. He seldom talked, and when he did, it was usually to make some cynical remark. For instance, he would say that God had given him a tail to keep the flies off, but he would sooner have no tail and no flies. Very funny. Alone among the animals on the farm. So alone among the animals on the farm. He never laughed. So, what was his name? Yeah, Benjamin. If asked why, he would say that he saw nothing to laugh at. Nevertheless, without openly admitting it, he was devoted to Boxer. The two of them usually spent their Sundays together in the small paddock beyond the orchard, grazing side by side and never speaking. So all the animals are coming in. The two horses had just lain down when a brood of ducklings, which had lost their mother, filed into the barn, cheeping feebly and wandering from side to side to find some place where they would not be trodden in. Clover made a sort of wall round them with her great foreleg, and the ducklings nestled down inside it and promptly fell asleep. At the last moment, Molly, the foolish, pretty white mare who drew Mr. Jones' trap, came mincing daintily in, chewing at a lump of sugar. She took a place near the front and began flirting her white mane, hoping to draw attention to the red ribbons it was plaited with. Last of all came the cat, who looked round as usual for the warmest place, and finally squeezed herself in between Boxer and Clover. There she purred contentedly throughout Major's speech, without listening to a word of what he was saying. So kind of like sleeping, right? All the animals were now present except Moses, the tame raven, who slept on a perch behind the back door. When Major saw that they had all made themselves comfortable and were waiting attentively, he cleared his throat and began. Like that. Comrades, you have heard already about the strange dream that I had last night, but I will come to the dream later. I have something else to say first. I do not think, comrades, that I shall be with you for many months longer, and before I die, I feel it my duty to pass on to you such wisdom as I have acquired. I've had a long life. I've had much time for thought as I lay alone in my stall, and I think I may say that I understand the nature of life on this earth as well as any animal now living. It is about this that I wish to speak to you. What is that? Now, comrades, what is the nature of this life of ours? Let's face it, our lives are miserable, laborious, and short. We are born, We're given just so much food as we will keep the breath in our bodies, and those of us who are capable of it are forced to work to the last atom of our strength. And the very instant that our usefulness has come to an end, we are slaughtered with hideous cruelty in a really terrible manner. No animal in England knows the meaning of happiness or leisure after he is 1 year old, or a year old. No animal in England is free. The life of an animal is misery and slavery. This is the plain truth. But is this simply part of the order of nature? Is it because this land of ours is so poor that it cannot afford a decent life to those who dwell upon it? No, comrades, 1,000 times no. The soil of England is fertile. Its climate is good. It is capable of affording food in abundance to an enormously greater number of animals than now inhabit it. This single farm of ours would support a dozen horses, 20 cows, hundreds of sheep, and all of them living in a comfort and a dignity that are now almost beyond our imagining. Why then do we continue in this miserable condition? Because nearly the whole of the produce of our labor is stolen from us by human beings. There, comrades, is the answer to all our problems. It is summed up in a single word: man. Man is the only real enemy we have. Remove man from the scene, and the root cause of hunger and overwork is abolished forever. Man is the only creature that consumes without producing. He does not give milk, he does not lay eggs, and he is too weak to pull the plow. He cannot run fast enough to catch rabbits, yet he is Lord of all the animals. He sets them to work. He gives back to them the bare minimum that will prevent them from starving. And the rest he keeps for himself. Our labor tills the soil. Our dung fertilizes it. And yet there's not one of us that owns more than his bare skin. You cows that I see before me, how many thousands of gallons of milk have you given during this last year? And what has happened to that milk, which should have been breeding up sturdy calves, baby cows? So the milk should have been given to baby cows. Every drop of it has gone down the throats of our enemies. And you hens, how many eggs have you laid in the last year? And how many of those eggs ever hatched into chickens? The rest have all gone to market to bring in money for Jones and his men. And you, Clover, where are those 4 foals you bore? The little horses that you gave birth to? Who should have been the support and pleasure of your old age? Each was sold at a year old. You will never see one of them again. In return for your 4 confinements and all your labor in the fields, what have you ever had except your bare rations and a stall? And even the miserable lives we lead are not allowed to reach their natural span. For myself, I do not grumble, for I am one of the lucky ones. I am 12 years old and have had over 400 children. Wow. Such is the natural life of a pig, and no animal escapes the cruel life in the end. You young porkers who are sitting in front of me, every one of you will scream your lives out at the block within a year. To that horror, we all must come. Cows, pigs, hens, sheep, everyone. Even the horses and the dogs have no better fate. You boxer, the very day that those great muscles of yours lose their power, Jones will sell you to the knacker, who will cut your throat and boil you down for the foxhounds. As for the dogs, when they grow old and toothless, Jones ties a brick around their necks and drowns them in the nearest pond. Crazy. Is it not crystal clear then, comrades, that all the evils of this life of ours spring from the tyranny of human beings? Only get rid of man, and the produce of our labor would be our own. Almost overnight, we could become rich and free. What then must we do? Why work night and day, body and soul, for the overthrow of the human race? That is my message to you, comrades. Rebellion. I do not know when the rebellion will come. It might be in a week or in 100 years, but I know as surely as I see this straw beneath my feet, the sooner or later justice will be done. Fix your eyes on that, comrades, throughout the short remainder of your lives. And above all, pass on this message of mine to those who come after you, so that future generations shall carry on the struggle until it is victorious. And remember, comrades, your resolution must never falter. No argument must lead you astray. Never listen when they tell you that man and the animals have a common interest. Never listen when they tell you that man and the animals have a common interest, and that the prosperity of the one is the prosperity of the others. It is all lies. Man serves the interests of no creature except himself. And among us, animals, let there be perfect unity, perfect comradeship in the struggle. All men are enemies. All animals are comrades. At this moment, there was a tremendous uproar. Everybody is motivated. Like, yes, this is true. While Major was speaking, four large rats had crept out of their holes and were sitting on their hindquarters, listening to him. The dogs had suddenly caught sight of them, and it was only by a swift dash for their holes that the rats saved their lives. Major raised his trotter for the silence. Comrades, he said, here's a point that must be settled. The wild creatures, such as rats and rabbits, are they our friends or our enemies? Let us put it to the vote. What do you guys think? I propose this question to the meeting. Are rats comrades? The vote was taken at once, and it was agreed by an overwhelming majority that rats were comrades, friends, like comrades. There were only four dissensions, the three dogs and the cat, who was afterwards discovered to have voted on both sides. Major continued, I have little more to say. I merely repeat, remember, always, your duty of enmity towards man and always and his ways. Remember always your duty of enmity towards man and all his ways. Whatever goes upon two legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon four legs or has wings is a friend. And remember also that in fighting against man, we must not come to resemble him. We must not come to resemble him. We must not behave like man. Resemble, look like. Even when you have conquered him, do not adopt his vices. No animal must ever live in a house, or sleep in a bed, or wear clothes, or drink alcohol, or smoke tobacco, or touch money, or engage in trade. No. All the habits of man are evil. And above all, no animal must ever tyrannize over his own kind. So no animal should ever fight each other. Weak or strong, clever or simple, we are all brothers. No animal must ever kill any other animal. All animals are equal. And now, comrades, I will tell you about my dream of last night. I cannot describe that dream to you. It was a dream of the earth as it will be when man has vanished, when man has disappeared completely. But it reminded me of something that I had long forgotten. Many years ago, when I was a little pig, my mother and the other sows used to sing an old song of which they knew only the tune and the first three words. I had known that tune in my infancy, but it had long since passed out of my mind. I had forgotten it. Last night, however, it came back to me in my dream. And what's more, the words of the song also came back. Words, I am certain, which were sung by the animals of long ago and have been lost to memory for generations. I will sing you that song, comrades. I am old and my voice is hoarse. But when I have taught you the tune, you can sing it better for yourself. It is called Beasts of England. Old Major cleared his throat and began to sing. As he had said, his voice was hoarse, but he sang well enough. And it was a stirring tune, something between this and that. I don't know what these are. The words ran, beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden future time. Soon or late the day is coming. Tyrant man shall be overthrown, and the fruitful fields of England shall be trod by beasts alone. Rings shall vanish from our noses, and the harness from our back. Bit and spur shall rust forever. Cruel whips no more shall crack. riches more than mind can picture, wheat and barley, oats and hay, clover, beans, and mangel wurzels shall be ours upon that day. Bright will shine the fields of England, purer shall its waters be, sweeter yet shall blow its breeze, on the day that sets us free. For that day we all must labor. Though we die before it break, cows and horses, geese and turkeys, all must toil for freedom's sake. Beasts of England, beasts of Ireland, beasts of every land and clime, hearken well and spread my tidings of the olden future time. The singing of this song threw the animals into the wildest excitement. They're like, yeah, let's go. Almost before Major had reached the end, they had begun singing it for themselves. That's nice. Even the stupidest of them had already picked up the tune and a few of the words. And as for the clever ones, such as the pigs and dogs, they had the entire song by heart within a few minutes. And then after a few preliminary tries, the whole farm burst out into Beasts of England in tremendous unison, like all together. The cows loved it, the dogs whined it, the sheep bleated it. Like, can you imagine a sheep singing? Beast of England. Beast. No, that would be a goat. The horses whinnied it, and the ducks quacked it. They were so delighted with the song that they sang it right through 5 times in succession, like one after the other, and might have continued singing it all night if they had not been interrupted. Unfortunately, the uproar awoke Mr. Jones, who sprang out of bed, making sure that there was a fox in the yard. He seized the gun, which always stood in a corner of his bedroom, and let fly a charge of number 6 shot into the darkness. So bang, bang, bang. The pellets buried themselves in the wall of the barn, and the meeting broke up hurriedly. Everyone fled to his own sleeping place. The birds jumped to their perches, the animals settled down in the straw, and the whole farm was asleep in a moment. 3 nights later, old Major died. Old Major died peacefully in his sleep. His body was buried at the foot of the orchard. Rest in peace, old Major. This was early in March. During the next 3 months, there was much secret activity. Major's speech had given to the more intelligent animals on the farm a completely new outlook on life. They did not know when the rebellion predicted by Major would take place. They had no reason for thinking that it would be within their own lifetime, but they saw clearly that it was their duty to prepare for it. The work of teaching and organizing the others fell naturally upon the pigs, who were generally recognized as being the cleverest of animals. Prominent among the pigs were two young boars named Snowball and Napoleon, whom Mr. Jones was breeding up for sale. Napoleon was a large, rather fierce-looking Berkshire boar, the only Berkshire on the farm. Not much of a talker, but with a reputation for getting his own way. Snowball was a more, what is this?
Vivacious means, especially of a woman, attractively lively and animated.
Vivacious, lively and attractive. So he was an attractive pig. Then Napoleon, quicker in speech and more inventive, but was not considered to have the same depth of character. All the other male pigs on the farm were porkers. The best known among them was a small fat pig named Squealer, with very round cheeks, twinkling eyes, nimble movement, and a shrill voice. He was a brilliant talker, and when he was arguing some difficult point, he had a way of skipping from side to side and whisking his tail, which was somehow very persuasive. The others said of Squealer that he could turn black into white. That's crazy. So you guys remember the character of Squealer, or the personality. Persuasive. These three had elaborated Old Major's teachings into a complete system of thought, to which they gave the name of animalism. Several nights a week, after Mr. Jones was asleep, they held secret meetings in the barn and expounded the principles of animalism to the others. At the beginning, they met with much stupidity and apathy. Apathy, they didn't care. Some of the animals talked of the duty of loyalty to Mr. Jones, whom they referred to as Master, or made elementary remarks such as, "Mr. Jones feeds us. Why are you saying bad things about Mr. Jones? If he were gone, we should starve to death." Others asked such questions as, "Why should we care for what happens after we are dead?" So only thinking about themselves, Or, if this rebellion is to happen anyway, what difference does it make whether we work for it or not? And the pigs had great difficulty in making them see that this was contrary to the spirit of animalism. The stupidest questions of all were asked by Molly, the white mare. What is the meaning of mare? M-A-R-E. Oh yeah, female horse. Female horse. Molly. So, the stupidest questions of all were asked by Molly, the white mare. The very first question she asked Snowball was, "Will there be sugar after the rebellion?" "No," said Snowball firmly. "We have no means of making sugar on this farm. Besides, you do not need sugar. You will have all the oats and hay you want. And shall I still be allowed to wear ribbons in my mane?" asked Molly. "Comrade," said Snowball, "those ribbons that you are so devoted to are the badge of slavery. Why are you so proud of it? Or why do you want it? Can you not understand that liberty is worth more than the ribbon? More than ribbons?" Molly agreed, but she did not sound very convinced. The pigs had even harder struggle to counteract the lies put about by Moses, the tame raven. Moses, who was Mr. Jones' special pet, was a spy and a talebearer. But he was also a clever talker. He claimed to know of the existence of a mysterious country called Sugar Candy Mountain, to which all animals went when they died. Sugar Candy Mountain. It was situated somewhere up in the sky, a little distance beyond the clouds, Moses said. In Sugar Candy Mountain, it was Sundays, 7 days a week. Clover was in season all the year round, and lump sugar and linseed cake grew on the hedges. The animals hated Moses because he told tales and did no work. But some of them believed in Sugar Candy Mountain, and the pigs had to argue very hard to persuade them that there was no such place. Their most faithful disciples were the two cart horses, Boxer and Clover. Those two had great difficulty in thinking anything out for themselves. But having once accepted the pigs as their teachers, they absorbed everything that they were told and passed it on to the other animals by simple arguments. They were unfailing in their attendance at the secret meetings in the barn, and led the singing beasts of England, with which the meetings always ended. Now, as it turned out, the rebellion was achieved much earlier and more easily than anyone had expected. Wow. In past years, Mr. Jones, although a hard master, had been a capable farmer, but of late he had fallen on evil days. He had become much disheartened after losing money in a lawsuit, and has taken to drinking more than was good for him. For whole days at a time he would lounge in his Windsor chair in the kitchen, reading the newspapers, drinking, and occasionally feeding Moses on crusts of bread soaked in beer. His men were idle and dishonest. The fields were full of weeds. The buildings wanted roofing. And the hedges were neglected, and the animals were underfed. They were not fed well. June came, and the day was almost ready for cutting. On Midsummer's Eve, which was a Saturday, Mr. Jones went into Wellington and got so drunk at the Red Lion that he did not come back till midday on Sunday. The man had milked the cows in the early morning and then had gone out rabbiting without bothering to feed the animals. When Mr. Jones got back, he immediately went to sleep on the drawing room sofa with the news of the world over his face, so that when evening came, the animals were still unfed. At last, they could stand it no longer. One of the cows broke in the door of the store shed with her horn, and all the animals began to help themselves from the bins. It was just then that Mr. Jones woke up. The next moment, he and his 4 men were in the store shed with whips in their hands, lashing out in all directions, so beating all the animals. This was more than the hungry animals could bear. With one accord, though nothing of the kind had been planned beforehand, they flung themselves upon their tormentors. Jones and his men suddenly found themselves being butted and kicked from all sides. The situation was quite out of their control. They had never seen animals behave like this before, and this sudden uprising of creatures whom they were used to thrashing and treating really badly, just as they chose, frightened them almost out of their wits. After only a moment or two, they gave up trying to defend themselves and took to their heels. A minute later, all 5 of them were in full flight down the cart track that led to the main road, with the animals pursuing them in triumph. Mrs. Jones looked out of the bedroom window, saw what was happening, hurriedly flung a few possessions into a carpet bag, and slipped out of the farm by another way. Moses sprang off his perch and flapped after her, croaking loudly. Meanwhile, the animals had chased Jones and his men out on the road and slammed the 5-barred gate behind them. And so, almost before they knew what was happening, the rebellion had been successfully carried through. Jones was expelled, and the Manor farm was theirs. You're going to be shocked what happens next. For the first few minutes, the animals could hardly believe in their good fortune. Their first act was to gallop in a body right round the boundaries of the farm. A body right. As though to make quite sure that no human being was hiding anywhere upon it. Then they raced back to the farm buildings to wipe out the last traces of Jones' hated reign. The harness room at the end of the stables was broken open. The bits, the nose rings, the dog chains, the cruel knives with which Mr. Jones had been used to castrate the pigs and lambs. The cruel knives with which Mr. Jones had used to castrate the pigs and lambs were all flung down a well. You guys know what a well is? Like a hole in the ground where you draw water from. The reins, halters, and blinkers, the degrading nose bags, were thrown on into the rubbish, to the rubbish fire which was burning in the yard. So were the whips. All animals capered with joy when they saw the whips going up in flames. So Snowball also threw on to the fire the ribbons with which the horses' manes and tails had usually been decorated on the market days. Ribbons, he said, should be considered as clothes, which are the mark of a human being. All animals should go naked. When Boxer heard this, he fetched the small straw hat which he wore in summer to keep the flies out of his ears, and flung it on the fire with the rest. In a very little while, the animals had destroyed everything that reminded them of Mr. Jones. Napoleon then led them back to the store shed and served out a double ration of corn to everybody, with 2 biscuits for each dog. Then they sang Beasts of England from end to end 7 times running, and after that they settled down for the night and slept as they had never slept before. But they woke at dawn as usual, and suddenly, remembering the glorious thing that had happened, they all raced out into the pasture together. A little way down the pasture there was a knoll that commanded a view of most of the farm. the animals rushed to the top of it and gazed around them, like they looked around them in the clear morning light. Yes, it was theirs. Everything that they could see was theirs. In the ecstasy of that thought, they gamboled round and round. They hurled themselves into the air in great leaps of excitement. They rolled in the dew. They rolled in the ground. They cropped mouthfuls of the sweet summer grass. They kicked up the clods of the black earth, snuffed its rich scent. Then they made a tour of inspection of the whole farm, surveyed the speechless admiration, the plowland, the hayfield, the orchard, the pool, the spinney. It was as though they had never seen these things before, and even now they could hardly believe that it was all their own. Then they filed back to the farm buildings and halted in silence outside the door of the farmhouse. You guys feel the excitement, feeling of freedom the animals are experiencing and they're feeling? The farmhouse, that was theirs too, but they were frightened to go inside. They were afraid to go inside because the farmhouse is where Mr. Jones lived, right? And they're not supposed to be like humans, right? They said, we don't do anything that humans do. After a moment, however, Snowball and Napoleon butted the door open with their shoulders, and the animals entered in single file, walking with the utmost care for fear of disturbing anything. They tiptoed from room to room, afraid to speak above a whisper and gazing with a kind of awe at the unbelievable luxury, at the beds with their feather mattresses, the looking glasses, the horsechair sofa, the Brussels carpet, the lithograph of Queen Victoria over the drawing room masterpiece. They were just coming down the stairs when Molly was discovered to be missing. Going back, the others found that she had remained behind in the best bedroom. She had taken a piece of blue ribbon from Mrs. Jones' dressing table and was holding it against her shoulder, admiring herself in the glass in a very foolish manner. The others reproached her sharply, and they went outside. Some hams hanging in the kitchen were taken out for burial, and the barrel of beer in the scullery was stove in with a kick from Boxer's hoof. Otherwise, nothing in the house was touched. A unanimous resolution was passed on the spot that the farmhouse should be preserved as a museum. The first corruption of the animal farm, right? No, we need to keep this as a museum. All were agreed that no animal must ever live there. The animals had their breakfast, and then Snowball and Napoleon called them together again. "Comrades," said Snowball, "it is 6:30, and we have a long day before us. Today we begin the hay harvest, but there's another matter that we must be attended to first." The pigs now revealed that during the past 3 months they had taught themselves to read and write from an old spelling book which had belonged to Mr. Jones' children, and which had been thrown on the rubbish heap. Napoleon sent for pots of black and white paint and led the way down to the 5-barred gate that gave on to the main road. Then Snowball, for it was Snowball who was best at writing, took a brush between the two knuckles of his trotter, painted out Manor Farm from the top bar of the gate, and in its place painted Animal Farm. This was to be the name of the farm from now onwards. After this, they went back to the farm buildings, where Snowball and Napoleon sent for a ladder which they caused to be set against the end wall of the pig barn. They explained that their studies of the past 3 months by their studies of the past 3 months, the pigs had succeeded in reducing the principles of animalism to 7 commandments. These 7 commandments would now be inscribed. It will be written on the wall. They would form an unalterable law by which all animals on the farm must live forever after. So it's going to be an unalterable. If something is unalterable, it means you cannot change it. So they said, this is going to be a law that is going to be unalterable. And all the animals must live by these laws or these commandments forever. With some difficulty, for it is not easy for a pig to balance himself on a ladder, Snowball climbed up and set to work. With Squealer a few rungs below him, holding the paint pot. The commandments were written on the tarred wall in great white letters that could be read 30 yards away. They ran as below. This was the 7 commandments. You guys want to read the 7 commandments? The 7 commandments. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes. You guys like the commandments? No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill any other animal. All animals are equal. It was very neatly written, beautifully written. And except that friend was written friend. Yeah. So there was a spelling mistake. And one of the S's was the wrong way round. The spelling was correct all the way through. Snowball read it aloud for the benefit of the others. All the animals nodded in complete agreement, and the cleverer ones at once again began to learn the commandments by heart. If you learn something by heart, it means you will not forget it. Now, comrades, throwing down the paintbrush to the hayfield. So he threw down the paintbrush to the hayfield. Let us make it a point of honor to get in the harvest more quickly than Jones and his men could do. But at this moment, the 3 cows, who had seemed uneasy for some time past, set up a loud lowing. They had not been milked for 24 hours, and their udders. Do you guys know what udders are? The udders are like, where the cows have milk. Udders. So, their udders were almost bursting. They were about to explode. After a little thought, the pigs sent for buckets and milked the cows fairly successfully, their trotters being well adapted to this task. Now, soon there were 5 buckets. There were 5 buckets, frothing creamy milk, at which many of the animals looked with considerable interest. "So, what's going to happen to all that milk?" said someone. Jones used sometimes to mix some of it in our mash. And one of the hens said that. Never mind the milk, comrades," cried Napoleon, placing himself in front of the buckets. "That will be attended to. The harvest is more important. Comrades, Snowball will lead the way. I shall follow you in a few minutes. Forward, comrades. The hay is waiting," so they have to go and harvest. So the animals trooped down to the hayfield to begin the harvest. And when they came back in the evening, it was noticed that the milk had disappeared. Somebody took the milk. Somebody stole the milk. Who do you guys think stole the milk? How they toiled and sweated to get the hay in. But their efforts were rewarded, for the harvest was an even bigger success than they had hoped. Sometimes the work was hard. The implements had been designed for human beings and not for animals, and it was a great drawback that no animal was able to use any tool that involved standing on his hind legs. But the pigs were so clever that they could think of a way around every difficulty. As for the horses, they knew every inch of the field, and in fact understood the business of mowing and raking far better than Jones and his men had ever done. The pigs did not actually work, but directed and supervised others. So they didn't work. With their superior knowledge, it was natural that they should assume the leadership, take on the leadership. Boxer and Clover would harness themselves to the cutter or the horse rake. No bits or reins were needed in these days, of course, and tramp steadily round and round the field with a pig walking behind and calling out, "Gee up, comrade," or "Whoa back, comrade," as the case might be. And every animal, down to the humblest, worked at turning the hay and gathering it. To the humblest. They were very humble. Even the ducks and hens toiled and fro all day in the sun, carrying tiny wisps of hay in their beaks. In the end, they finished the harvest in 2 days, less time than it had usually taken Mr. Jones and his men. Moreover, it was the biggest harvest that the farm had ever seen. There was no wastage whatsoever. The hens and ducks, with their sharp eyes, had gathered up the very last stalk, and not an animal on the farm had stolen so much as a mouthful. All through that summer, the work of the farm went like clockwork. Clockwork. Do you guys know that term? It went like clockwork. It means it was smooth. Everything worked very smoothly. No problems. The animals were happy as they had never conceived it possible to be. Every mouthful of food was an acute, positive pleasure, now that it was truly their own food, produced by themselves and for themselves, not doled out to them by a grudging master. With the worthless, parasitical human being gone, there was more for everyone to eat. There was more leisure too. Inexperienced though the animals were, so there was more free time. They met with many difficulties. For example, later in the year when they harvested the corn, they had to tread it out in the ancient style and blow away the chaff with their breath. Since the farm possessed no threshing machine, but the pigs, with their cleverness, and Boxer, with his tremendous muscles, always pulled them through. Boxer was the admiration of everybody. He had been a hard worker even in Jones' time, but now he seemed more like 3 horses than one. There were days when the entire work of the farm seemed to rest on his mighty shoulders. Boxer. From morning to night, he was pushing and pulling, always at the spot where the work was the hardest. He had made an arrangement with one of the cockerels to call him in the morning half an hour earlier than everybody else, and would put in some volunteer labor at whatever seemed to be most needed. Before regular day's work began, his answer to every problem, every setback was, "I will work harder," which he had adopted as his personal motto. Motto. But everyone worked according to his capacity. The hens and ducks, for instance, saved 5 bushels of corn at the harvest of gathering up the stray grains. Nobody stole, nobody grumbled over his rations. The quarreling, arguments, biting, and jealousy, which had been the normal features of life in the old days, had almost disappeared. Nobody shirked, or almost nobody. Molly, it was true, was not good at getting up in the mornings and had a way of leaving work early on the ground that there was a stone in her hoof. And the behavior of the cat was somewhat peculiar. it was soon noticed that when there was work to be done, the cat would never be found. You guys have a cat? Does anybody have a cat? You know, like they go and hide. She would vanish, disappear for hours on end, and then reappear at mealtimes when it's time to eat, right? Or in the evenings after work was over, as though nothing had happened. But she always made such excellent excuses, and purred so affectionately that it was impossible not to believe her good intentions. Old Benjamin, the donkey, seemed quite unchanged since the rebellion. He did his work in the same slow, obstinate way as he had done it in Joan's time, never shirking, never volunteering for extra work either. About the rebellion and its results, he would express no opinion. When asked whether he was not happier now than that Jones was gone, he would say only, "Donkeys live a long time. None of you has ever seen a dead donkey." And the others had to be content with this cryptic answer. On Sundays, there was no work. Breakfast was an hour later than usual. And after breakfast, there was a ceremony. Crazy. There was a ceremony which was observed every week without fail. First came the hoisting of the flag. Snowball had found in the harness room an old green tablecloth of Mrs. Jones' and had painted on it a hoof and a horn in white. This was run up the flagstaff in the farmhouse garden every Sunday morning. The flag was green, Snowball explained, to represent the green fields of England, while the hoof and horn signified the future republic of the animals, which would arise when the human race had been finally overthrown. After the hoisting of the flag, all animals trooped into the big barn for a general assembly, which was known as the meeting. Here, the work of the coming week was planned out, and resolutions were put forward and debated. It was always the pigs who put forward the resolutions, the solution or final decisions. The other animals understood how to vote, but could never think of any resolutions of their own. Snowball and Napoleon were by far the most active in the debates. But it was noticed that these two were never in agreement. Whatever suggestion either of them made, the other could be counted on to oppose. Even when it was resolved, a thing no one could object to in itself, to set aside the small paddock behind the orchard as a home of rest for animals who were past work. There was a stormy debate over the correct retiring age for each class of animal. The meeting always ended with the singing of Beasts of England. And the afternoon was given up to recreation, just having fun, chilling. The pigs had set aside the harness room as a headquarters for themselves, HQ. Here, in the evenings, they studied blacksmithing, carpentering, and other necessary arts from books which they had brought out of the farmhouse. Snowball also busied himself with organizing the other animals into what he called animal committees. It was indefatigable.
Indefatigable means
Indefatigable.
of a person or their efforts, persisting tirelessly.
Persisting tirelessly. So just persistent. So he was persistent at this. He formed the egg production committee for the hens and the clean tails league for the cows, the wild comrades re-education committee. The object of this was to tame the rats and rabbits, the wider wool movement for the sheep, the various others, besides instituting classes in reading and writing. On the whole, these projects were a failure. The attempt to tame the wild creatures, for instance, broke down almost immediately. They continued to behave very much as before, and when treated with generosity, simply took advantage of it. The cat joined the re-education committee and was very active in it for some days. She was seen one day sitting on a roof and talking to some sparrows, some birds, who were just out of her reach. She was telling them that all animals were now comrades and that any sparrow who chose could come and perch on her paw. But the sparrows kept their distance. They didn't want to be there. The reading and writing classes, however, were a great success. By the autumn, almost every animal on the farm was literate in some degree. As for the pigs, they could already read and write perfectly. The dogs learned to read fairly well, but were not interested in reading, except the 7th commandment. Muriel, the goat, could read somewhat better than the dogs, and sometimes used to read to the others in the evening from scraps of newspaper which she found on the bush heap. Benjamin could read as well as any pig, but never exercised his faculty. So far as he knew, he said, there was nothing worth reading. Clover learned the whole alphabet, but could not put words together. Boxer could not get beyond the letter D. So he's like A, B, C, D, O. He just couldn't do it. That's crazy. He's like, I can't. This alphabet thing, too difficult for me. He would trace out A, B, C, D in the dust with his great hoof, and then would stand staring at the letters with his ears back, sometimes shaking his forelock. His head. Forelock. Do you guys remember what animal was Boxer? On several occasions, forelock. So, trying with all his might to remember what came next and never succeeding. On several occasions, indeed, he did learn E, F, G, H, but by the time he knew them, it was always discovered that he had forgotten A, B, C, D. So, finally, he decided to be content with the first 4 letters and used to be content with used to write them out once or twice every day to refresh his memory. Molly refused to learn anything but the 6 letters which spelled her own name. She would form these very neatly out of pieces of twig, and would then decorate them with a flower or two and walk around them, admiring them. None of the other animals on the farm could get further than letter A. They're just like A. That's it. It was also found that the stupider animals, such as the sheep, hens, and ducks, were unable to learn the 7 commandments by heart. They couldn't memorize it. After much thought, Snowball declared that the 7 commandments could in effect be reduced to a single maxim. Snowball, one of the pigs, right? The pig leader. He said, you know what? The 7 commandments, well, we're just gonna make it one single maxim. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. That's it. So they're like, guys, you guys remember the 7 commandments? This one? I just want to make sure everybody understands. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. This, he said, contained the essential principle of animalism. Whoever had thoroughly grasped it, whoever understood it, would be safe from human influences. The birds at first objected, since it seemed to them that they also had 2 legs, but Snowball proved to them this was not so. So whatever Snowball said, the big boss. So, you guys see what's happening? A bird's wing, comrades, he said, is an organ of propulsion and not of manipulation. It should therefore be regarded as a leg. The distinguishing mark of man is the hand, the instrument with which he does all his mischief. Corruption. The birds did not understand Snowball's long words, but they accepted. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And all the humbler animals set to work to learn the maxim by heart. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And this was inscribed on the end wall of the barn, above the 7 commandments, and in bigger letters. When they had once got it by heart, the sheep developed a great liking for this maxim. He's like, this is good. And often they lay in the field, they would all start bleating. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Like that. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And keep it up for hours on end. Never growing tired of it. They just loved it. Napoleon took no interest in Snowball's committees. He didn't like it. He's like, I don't like this whole committee thing. He said that the education of the young was more important than anything that could be done for those who were already grown up. It happened that Jessie and Blueball had both whelped soon after the hay harvest, giving birth between them to 9 sturdy puppies. As soon as they were weaned, Napoleon took them away from their mothers, saying that he would make himself responsible for the education. He took them up in a loft, into a loft, which would only be reached by a ladder from the harness room, and there kept them in such seclusion that the rest of the animals soon forgot their existence. The mystery of where the milk went. Yeah, you guys remember the milk part? The milk mystery? The mystery of where the milk went to was soon cleared up. It was mixed every day into the pig's mash. So the pigs had or drank the milk. The early apples were now ripening, and the grass of the orchard was littered with windfalls. The animals had assumed as a matter of course that these would be shared out equally. One day, however, the order went forth that all the windfalls were to be collected and brought to the harness room for the use of the pigs. At this, some of the other animals murmured. They're like, what? But it was no use. All the pigs were in full agreement on this point. Even Snowball, Napoleon, Squealer, even Snowball and Napoleon, they all agreed. They're like, you know what? Yeah, this is all for us. Squealer was sent to make the necessary explanations to the others. Comrades, he cried, you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are doing this in spirit of selfishness and privilege. We're not being selfish that we take these for ourselves. Many of us actually dislike milk and apples. We don't even like milk and apples. Our sole object, I dislike them myself, like I don't even like apple and milk. Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health. It's just for our health. Milk and apples, this has been proved by science, comrades, contain substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig. We pigs are brain workers. The whole management and organization of this farm depend on us. Day and night, we are watching over your welfare. It is for your sake that we drink that milk and eat those apples. Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back. So he's manipulating and he's scaring them. Yes, Jones would come back. Surely, comrades, cried Squealer, almost pleadingly, skipping from side to side, whisking his tail. Surely there's no one among you who wants to see Jones come back, right? You guys don't want to see Jones come back. Now, if there was one thing that the animals were completely certain of, it was that they did not want Jones come back. When it was put to them in this light, creating fear, right, among the animals, manipulating the animals, they had no more to say. The importance of keeping the pigs in good health was all too obvious. It was agreed without further argument that the milk and the windfall apples, and also the main crop of apples when they ripened, should be reserved for the pigs and the pigs alone.